Okay, let's not.
The worst fan
Save
base.
it for the podcast, fellas. Man, why?
What was that?
I clear my throat so much.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on.
It sounds like you're dying.
Gotta get that air pocket in betwixt your hands.
Just talking to the YouTubers.
Hey, guys.
Welcome to episode 33 of From the Middle. We are three middle-class guys with a point of view that's somewhere in the middle. We're in middle America. We're middleweights. We're middle.
Metal.
You got to say.
Metal.
That's ears. We're all wearing headphones, pal.
Thank you for joining us for another episode. As promised, we are going to break down all things Star Wars in this episode. Spoiler. Spiggity, spoiler. Spoiler warning, if you've not seen Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker or The Mandalorian, you might want to just catch us for 34. If you don't care about either of those things, you're missing out and you're wrong.
Hard pass on a friendship with me.
Yeah, we're all right.
So we're going to do that. But before we do...
The mission of the Millennium Falcon. Explore new galaxies.
We just want to thank our sponsor, Backroom Coffee Roasters. Visit backroomcoffee.com, buy coffee, use the drop down in your cart that you heard about it from the podcast, and there's a space down at the bottom where you can write Midler, not your promo code. It's like a comment in the cart. Be sure to do that, and then they'll know that we sent you, and it would really help them, and it would really help us. So we thank you for your support.
And it's backroomcoffeeroasters.com.
Backroomcoffeeroasters.com.
Yeah.
Backroom Coffee Roasters is the coffee fueled inspiration. Brown. Really appreciate it. They have really good coffee. We're not just saying that because they pay us.
I'm also a client.
Also a client.
I'm not just a paid sponsor. I'm also a client.
Best coffee in the galaxy.
Hey.
So, guys.
Word.
We've we've all three.
Well, rude.
Yeah. Okay.
You decide which one I was excluding.
It was me.
Fight to
That's
the
a
death.
spoiler. It was me.
We've all three done our research on reading articles. We've all watched the movie twice, right?
I've watched
Dill
it
Dill.
once.
Okay, Dill's
Once.
only seen it once.
Yeah.
Once. There's a T at the end. And we're super excited to get into the meat of Star Wars. A couple things, though. Allow the overthinker to hedge just a wee bit. First of all,
A mid-bit?
a mid-tidbit. Should probably
Careful.
stop. We don't want to be a podcast that's only about reviewing and commenting on the various forms of entertainment that we consume. We want to be creating things and creating content for you guys. So if you ever feel like, gosh, they just watch something and talk about it, that's not what we want to be. So we get that. We also get that Star Wars isn't life. There are more important things in life than Star Wars. But for all of us, it's been a good chunk of our lives, or we grew up on it, or we really like the franchise, and it means a lot to us. So I think few pieces of entertainment have influenced our culture in the way that Star Wars has over the last 42 years.
Sure.
So we get that it's not the most important thing. There are children and faith and all of those things. That being said, we're going to talk about it for an hour.
Yeah, because it's at least fourth or fifth on that list.
Yeah. Friend of ours, Jerry, who's also a very big Star Wars fan. Not very... Okay. He's a... We've done this before. My modifier was dangling.
Don't come to YouTube for that one.
He shared a tweet with us before I saw the movie that I really liked. And he said, that this is by Obs Canobs. He said the idea of Star Wars is kind of like Oz, this imposing, seemingly all-powerful thing that we've elevated to such a high place in pop culture that we forget that it's really just a bunch of people behind a curtain trying hard to create stories that even approach what's in our minds. That felt very true. And we're going to talk about some of the outrage that happened with The Last Jedi and some of the outrage that's happening with the Rise of Skywalker. We've said on here many times that Star Wars fans, nobody hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans, okay?
True.
So we want to come at it, though, from both sides, and we want to raise thoughts from both sides. Here's the other thing I'll say before we get into it. Hating popular things doesn't make you an interesting person. So if you just want to go, everybody seems to be liking this thing, I'm just going to hate on it because it makes me somehow inadvertently interesting, that's not true. One of my best friends from high school, after watching it, wrote on Facebook, Rise of Skywalker is without exaggeration the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life, and a shameless cash grab by Disney. I felt violated.
Oh, them too, huh?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. We won't name names. You know who you are. That can't be true because the movie Cats exists.
Also,
There's a whole Adam Sandler franchise out there that
Which
you must
one?
have forgot about.
yes.
Now, he did say movies he's seen, so maybe he just hasn't seen Cats.
That could be.
Maybe he hasn't seen Suicide Squad. Maybe he hasn't seen Batman versus Superman. Fair. But you're just, come on, really?
I feel violated.
I feel violated.
To what right did you have?
And then you brought up a really good point, Dylan, where you said it seems like people just want to compare whatever trilogy's happening right now to the trilogy they grew up with. And they want their heroes to be the best heroes.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And I think to expand on that, like, because a good buddy of mine texted me, he's like, I'm not even, after The Last Jedi, he was definitely in the camp where he hated The Last Jedi. He's like, I'm not even going to go see Rise of Skywalker in theaters. I'll maybe see it later. And he's like, The Mandalorian is like what Star Wars should be, and it's so much greater. It's putting The Rise of Skywalker to shame. And my only reply back was, it's not a competition.
Right. It's all the same franchise. You
don't have to compare them. And if you love the original trilogy more than anything else, that's great.
Yeah.
But you don't have to compare 7, 8, and 9 to 4, 5, and 6 and pit them against one another.
Exactly.
It's if you don't like them, don't watch them. If you don't view them as part of the canon universe for you, that's fine.
And you're wrong.
But they're not really competing. Now, if you were trying to rank them for fun,
Sure.
which I did,
Yeah.
just because I thought it would be fun,
Yeah.
that's one thing. Then you're doing it just to see, ooh, yeah, I guess I did like this one a little better. But I don't understand. In the prequel trilogies were the worst films ever made until Disney made the sequel trilogies, and now people are coming around a little bit to the prequel trilogies, which is fascinating because I've enjoyed those since they came out, and I've watched the internet hate them.
Man, they were
Right.
so hated on.
And now all of a sudden it's like, well, at least the prequels insert thing,
Right.
but Disney did this insert terrible thing.
Right.
And it's so interesting to watch.
Yeah, you know what? The people who hated Last Jedi are the same people who hate, the people who are like, Ryan Johnson, he just forgot everything that J.J. Abrams was trying to do. Blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. I hate Star Wars.
Yeah.
And now they're like, J.J. Abrams is just forgetting everything that Ryan Johnson was trying to do. And I hate Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like people are trying to one up their dweebness on each other.
I don't understand.
and that's what it's about.
I didn't like
That's
7
the culture.
because it rehashed A New Hope. And I didn't like 8 because it was different.
Exactly.
So 7 was bad because it was too similar. 8
Yeah.
was bad because it was not too similar.
Man, it's just this
and that
weird,
bothers me.
It's this weird entitlement culture that
wild.
that like if it's not what I would have made, then I hate it. But I think it goes even further than that, because I think that there's a lot of people who just want to hate it because they think it's cool to be someone who's hating it, and they think it's cool to be someone who calls himself a fan and therefore is more informed than you and is hating it. So then
key.
at
that point, it doesn't even matter what they wanted.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be satisfied with anything.
And the thing is, that doesn't mean that that you have to love every piece of every movie either.
Yeah.
That's not what we're saying. But there's a way to reasonably watch something and go, You know, that's still better. My least favorite Star Wars fan is still better than a lot of other things that I've seen.
That at least puts you in perspective of who you are, right? And so, like you know who doesn't have a say? You.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's
and ultimately it says more about you as a person.
exactly.
You know, and
exactly. That's not how Star Wars goes. Well, you know what? You have no choice. That's how Star Wars went. You can take it or leave it. We have the 9 episodes. The story is written.
Yeah.
You can decide to like it or not like it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But J.J. Abrams' 9th movie is the 9th movie
It's
of
the
Star
finale
Wars. It's the way it
of
ends.
the Skywalker saga.
It is the way that it ends.
Yeah.
It is not wrong because it's the actual movie.
Yeah, I made a joke to you that
It's a made-up universe.
originally, by the way, the more films that we have, the more older films get a little more love and are a little less hated.
Right.
Originally, episode 6 was not viewed as favorably as it is now.
Oh, yeah.
Return of the Jedi or Revenge of the Jedi, if you want to go off the original title. And it was sort of like 4 was good, 5 was amazing, 6 was okay, until we had the prequels. And now the original trilogy was terrible, and we've already talked about that. But I made the joke to you, Kory, that if you like less Star Wars movies, or if you don't like more Star Wars movies than you like, you might just not actually be a Star Wars fan.
Right.
Yeah.
It's possible you don't actually care for Star Wars because George Lucas, the creator, made 6 of them. And so if you like less of the 6, at least the 6, than you do more, you just might not like it.
Leave the rest of us alone.
Yeah. And begs the question, does something become too big that George Lucas or now Disney doesn't even own it, that the fans own it?
No.
I don't agree with that philosophy. Most people disagree with us. Something can become so big culturally it belongs to the fans.
Well, that goes back to the tweet.
In what sense?
I don't. It's
Well, that goes back to the
to me,
tweet
it
that I
feels
shared.
like a weird hippie argument. I don't understand.
I don't think they actually own it. I think it's here's why I care so much kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I own it because it's a part of the thing that shaped me. Yes, it's just a movie or a series of movies.
Right.
But it's the toys you grew up playing with. It's the thing you used to play in your backyard. You used to read the fan fiction. You used to read the expanded universe stuff. You had video games that had to do like it's like what I said. It's so infused itself into pop culture that I think that's why people care. You could do a whole documentary on why this is one of the most passionate fan bases that exists. So there's going to be vitriol and there's going to be like blind devotion and everything in between.
Yeah.
And it's just a really interesting, you could do a whole psychological survey on Star Wars fans and the generations of Star Wars fans. And so I think that's what you mean when you say they feel like they own it. Like you should do it the way I think it should go because I'm so passionate about it and it's meant so much to me over the course of my life. And they forget that what the tweet said, they forget that it's just a guy behind a curtain trying to make stories that even compare to this thing that you've created in your head.
Yeah. Obviously, we've already said it's not literally owning the IP. It's that you owe the fans something greater. When it feels so presumptuous that the people who've worked their entire career to try to achieve a position at Lucasfilm and literally spend all their working hours and probably a lot of their private time thinking about all of this stuff are the people who really ultimately spearhead. Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams jump in for elements and story writing and whatever, but it's the people that execute at Lucasfilm. To presume that you've spent more time and effort thinking about and working on these stories, to me, is silly.
That's one thing that I think is an argument that's dead on arrival is the argument of anybody outside of Lucasfilm who tries to make any kind of argument that I know more about the Star Wars canon than they do.
Or that they don't care and it's purely cash.
Right.
I'm pretty sure those people work at Lucasfilm, at least a strong majority, because they deeply care about Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, you don't go try to work somewhere like that if you don't really, really love it.
Yeah.
And so it's presumptuous and honestly probably insulting to a lot of those people who work really hard on the designs and the sets and the lore and writing the story. Because it's not like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson know all the canon. They've got to go talk to all these people who know all the history and consult and go, oh, you can't write that character because this time period they would have been in a battle in this part of space, and you can't include that planet because it got, it's crazy.
And contrary to what a lot of people might think, and I mean, admittedly contrary to what you might see in the films, but I still, in my head, I can at least put together plausible arguments that it's still a streamlined story. But even like Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, like they collaborated. They were in each other's discussions.
George Lucas was there. He was giving recommendations and doing consulting on the movie.
Kathleen Kennedy was there the entire time, working with all the directors.
I don't think there's any truth to the idea that there was some kind of a story battle going on between the two directors of the last three films. I don't think that occurred.
Yeah. Maybe they didn't write as cohesive of a storyline as you would have liked.
Sure.
And I don't mean you, but I mean fans in general.
Right.
And again, that's where it's okay to have some thoughts that are dissenting from, it's not all perfect and perfectly flawlessly executed.
I feel like when people talk about C.S. Lewis, that it puts them above reproach. C.S. Lewis was known as this is going to be some paraphrasing, but he talks about this idea of there's literacy reading and non-literacy reading, or literary reading and non-literary reading and readers, and he contrasts them and says like the non-literary readers are so wrapped up in the narrative that anything that might come in and sort of creatively disrupt that flow, they're just pissed off at. That is my word, pissed off. I don't think C.S. Lewis used the word pissed. The literary readers read the exact same thing, and they take the book for what it is as a book, and they are able to get themselves caught up in a world that they've never been in before. Mm-hmm. And that person walks away enjoying it. The first person walks away mad. Mm.
That's well said.
I thought that was an interesting, and I obviously I see that among a lot in this. Now I'm not saying that everybody fits into one of those two camps, but I do think that a lot of Star Wars fans are bad readers.
Yeah. That's really well said, and we've kind of gotten into the Rise of Skywalker itself, the last installment of the Skywalker saga, Episode 9. Believe it or not, everything we've talked about for 17 minutes is just context for the franchise itself and the fandom. So you can understand the amount of pressure going into creating this end of a trilogy, but end of 3 trilogies. We've talked about this before, that was on their shoulders. So let's kind of go chronologically with because none of us saw it on opening night, right?
I saw it on
the Friday, which
opened, right? We saw it about the same time.
I saw it on Saturday.
Okay, which is the next day. It now comes out the day before. But anyway, before any of us had seen it, you had brought up, hey, are you guys kind of concerned that some of the fan feedback and even some of the cast walk out of there and they're like, it's a lot?
Yeah, I was watching videos of the cast being interviewed, and that was a little concerning. Overall, other than most people will knock JJ for how he handled the end of Lost, I think most people have been fine with a lot of JJ's work overall. So I trusted in a sense that JJ would resolve it as best as possible. But I was concerned that the cast... Nobody wanted it. It felt like after The Last Jedi, the cast probably enjoyed it, but nobody wanted to commit to a positive reaction and then deal with the backlash from fans.
Yeah.
So I almost, now in hindsight, I read it as we have no idea how people are going to take this after The Last Jedi. So all we're going to say is, man, it's a lot to take in. I don't even know what to say. It's a lot. And they didn't want to commit because they didn't want to promise fans, oh, it was amazing, and then fans be like, how could you say that?
Well, I mean, there's stories of I don't know people's names at all, but there's stories of actors that had deleted profiles, like they're no longer on Instagram because they couldn't put up with the fans.
Daisy Ridley is one of them.
Yeah,
and the actress for Rose, Tika.
Kelly
Marie
Tran.
Tran.
She was another one. She had to delete all of her
Marie
stuff
Tran,
and just get off social media because she couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And You had the guy who portrayed Jar Jar Binks, who almost committed suicide over
Yep.
it. And I mean, that's
Even the young
I'm
kid in the
serious.
prequels that played Anakin.
Yeah.
The young child Anakin.
Star Wars fans are the worst.
The worst. So we were dropping our two youngest off at the sitter. Our neighbors very nicely agreed to watch our two youngest so we could go see it on the 20th, which was opening night. And I thought this was interesting and worth bringing up on this podcast. So our neighbor is older. He would have grown up with the original trilogy. And I kind of said, are you excited to see it? And he's like, yeah, I just kind of stopped watching these sequel trilogies. And I said, really? Why is that? He goes, I don't know. They just kind of lost me with some of the story. But he goes, I really got upset when I saw that Palpatine might be in this new one. And I said, really? Why is that? And he goes, because as a kid, when you've grown up with this trilogy and this character that you thought was the epitome of evil goes against his master, Emperor Palpatine, to save his son, to witness that as a kid was one of the most powerful moments in movie history for me. So the fact that this Palpatine guy could be back when he did that ultimate sacrifice feels like a big slap in the face. Like it kind of undoes what Vader did. And I agree with, I not agree with, I had never really thought about it from that perspective.
Sure.
Like he still saved Luke, obviously. But like to keep bringing back the ultimate villain.
There's a giant but here,
Yeah.
which is still that it's a movie. If you remember, if it caused you to think of some truths or some things in your life, that is great and that is fantastic. Why the hell would you let the movie take that from you? That's on you at that point. Like that is ridiculous. Like that is all of that. Like the I had the toys, I grew up with it, it's on my future. That's all well and good. I understand that people can get emotionally attached to that stuff. I also understand that is why materialism is a problem. Like I don't listen to that and feel fuzzy. I listen to that and feel like there's a problem with these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand feeling so attached to something you want it to resolve in a way that feels satisfying.
Yeah.
Without it ultimately controlling your life.
Yeah.
I guess if I had a counterpoint to that, and it people can have whatever reaction ultimately they want. I mean, we railed a little bit against, but fine, think whatever you want about it. But
I don't care about opinion. Yeah,
it doesn't change the sacrifice. It doesn't change that ultimately Vader cared more about his son and chose his son over Palpatine, and it doesn't change that he saved him.
Sure.
And I don't really know why people would be upset when you're dealing with this idea that one person has been the villain across 9, ultimately we find out 9 films. Mm-hmm. And so we're dealing with the same threat. It's an ongoing threat. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I understand for people that watch the original trilogy, some people made that comment about how they handled Luke in episodes, basically 8. Really, we don't see him in 7, but like after you've seen him become the hero in 6, and then where you see him in The Last Jedi in 8, it's probably a similar argument. You took this hero of my childhood and you've tarnished, the name and the figure. And
Well, and I don't know. I think if we were to look at it as a story of the Skywalkers, right? And now we find out for 9 films, it is specifically the story of the Skywalkers versus Palpatine. Mm-hmm. And what you find along all of, and this is where it can all string together. You have a whole family, generations upon generations, everyone from Vader to Luke to Leia to Han to Kylo, that all like that all sacrificed everything in trying to overcome Palpatine and try to do something good for humanity. And that was the story of all of them. And the only place it stopped was at Rey, and that's because her story's not over yet.
Right.
yeah.
So that leads us to, so now we're going into it. We've all seen it now for the first time. Just initial reactions after you walked out of there viewing number 1.
I loved it. I I do. I like the way the storyline went. I had my own kind of hope as to what the storyline was going to be, and that wasn't it. I was actually, I like things that end dark and dissonant, and so I wanted to see that kind of like a Quentin Tarantino-ish ending of people just like, is that really it? Is it done now? Like that's kind of what I wanted. And so what I wasn't expecting, but what I wanted to see was a double role reversal between Kylo and Rey.
Oh, okay. Yep.
I wanted to see.
She goes dark. He goes.
Yeah.
Light.
I mean, I think everybody probably expected that Kylo was going to turn, which he did. And I think it wouldn't have surprised a whole lot of people if Rey would have turned. I was hoping that not only would it have gone that far, but that in some kind of weird way that Kylo would defeat Rey by the end of the movie, and we'd be rooting for Kylo, and we'd be cheering the demise of Rey by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I was hoping for that kind of role reversal, which didn't happen that way. But I still like what happened. I'll leave it at that. I won't talk about the things that didn't piss me off, that pissed a lot of people off, because I think there's a lot of those. But yeah, no, I liked it.
Yeah, I walked. While I was in the theater, I kept having this reaction where you'll only catch this if you're on YouTube. I just kept looking at the screen, going this sort of face of disbelief,
and it wasn't the strobe lights,
and it was the pacing. No, it was the pacing that made me do that.
Yeah.
If I had one, if it's not even a criticism as much as an observation. I just walked out of the theater and my wife asked me, "What do you think?" And I said, "That was breakneck speed."
Yeah,
the entire film.
There was a lot to cover. There's a lot to do.
I really like the movie. I didn't really have anything to nitpick after. I don't know that I would say I loved it, but I really liked it. And for me, I like The Last Jedi, but it's probably my least favorite of all the live action films. So my expectations were pretty low.
Sure.
Coming into The Rise of Skywalker, so it was going to be a little easier to please me as long as I felt like they resolved the story in a relatively meaningful way. My biggest hope is that we get an extended version of the film if the footage is there.
Yeah.
It was something like 2 hours and 20 minutes. That could have easily been a 240, 3 hour long movie. I really, really want an extended version of the film. And I think I joked to you, Kory, since the Lord of the Rings films came out, I've never watched the theatrical release again. I watched the theatrical cut in the theater, and I waited and bought the extended films, and I've never gone back to the original theatrical cut of Lord of the Rings. I would do the exact same thing with Rise of Skywalker. If there's an extended one, I desperately want to watch it.
I agree. No, there's a lot to cover there. And just as a side point, I agree. Social justice, it would have been good to see a couple of the newer characters get played up a little bit more in the last movie and get some explanation. Let some more in. But when you look at all of the loose ends that needed to be tied and everything, I mean, how many more things could you add into the explanation of that film? And so I think it just simply came down to that. Like we don't have time to introduce new stories.
Yeah.
Well, that's the difference. When you think about the original trilogy, you really had a small batch of characters with a story to tell. And now a lot of those carried over into 3 more films, plus you dumped in a whole new batch.
Plus you added some romantic twists and things like that. And it's like, we can't address all of it.
Yeah. And
we're going to deal with the ones that have been going on for 8 movies.
Yeah. And we had a lot of characters in the prequel trilogy, but really it was Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan. Obviously
Right.
Palpatine, but really from the hero's perspective, we have 3 characters really to pay attention to. And y'all complained about their dialogue, by the way. But anyway, but you had 3 characters to focus on. And then the original trilogy, you had Han, Leia, Luke, really Chewie as well.
Sure.
But really those 3 to flesh out. And now in this prequel, you had a lot of those characters come back, and then you're throwing in Lando, and then
that's a good point.
You've got Ben, and you've got Rey, and you've got Kylo Ren, and Rey, and Poe, and they tried to put Rose in there. Maybe they shouldn't have tried to Force Rose there.
Yeah.
You've just
And
got
then
a lot
you've
more
got
characters
Snoke.
to flesh out.
A lot of people
And a new
upset that
villain.
there wasn't a backstory about Snoke, and
Yeah.
again, it's like, how much time do you have?
Yeah, which turned out there was, whether that was retconned or not.
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah.
maybe that was the plan all along, but yeah, it's interesting. I think they just had a lot more they had to tie up.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right, and they just had a lot more characters to do it with.
Yeah.
And ultimately, people can say, well, then that's a director/writer issue,
Right.
or there wasn't enough planned out ahead of time to make sure that wasn't an issue. I hear that in hindsight, I don't think Disney will ever make that mistake again with Star Wars.
I think that if there wasn't this, because it would have ticked people off more if you would have gone beyond we're going to do 3 and then 3 and then 3. Yeah. Now, if there wasn't sort of like that map before they had gotten started, this would have easily have been 2-3 movies.
Yeah,
and everybody would have been probably kinder with that situation. Maybe that's also part of it, is that it's a finale and people know it's a finale, and so the things that they were hoping to see, now they're not
just
going
upset
to.
it's over. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no possibility of seeing it now.
That
Yeah.
could be
No
it too.
possibility.
That's a good point.
I know, Kory, you said that it could have been 2 movies. I think fans would have been more ticked if they would have had more of the cash grab argument if they had said a year ago, well, actually, we're gonna make this into 2 films,
Right, and that's the thing. So
to me, just make it a almost 3-hour movie. We all sat through Lord of the Rings. I made that joke once before.
Oh, yeah.
We sat through 3-hour films. Everyone's fine. We're adults. Like, we can watch it. People are there for the last Star Wars.
Yeah, you go. That's why you go and see it twice, so that way you can like make sure you don't go to the bathroom at the same time.
Right.
I'll say it slightly differently. I don't think it should have been 2 movies. It felt like content-wise, what was contained in 9 could have been 2 movies.
Sure.
I would agree.
I don't even think you should have made it 2 movies. But my only thing, so driving down to the theater, Lily, my going to be 13-year-old, said, "So what do you hope? What are your expectations?" I'm like, I really learned something from our friend Jerry, a big Star Wars fan again, where I think it was Solo, and I was being a little critical of Solo, and he goes, "You know what? At the end of the day, if it has Star Wars written on it and I'm entertained for 90 minutes to 2 hours, I'm good." And I sort of adopted that mindset. So my expectations were, I want to enjoy it. And I really only had 1 or 2 things, one of them being, I really do hope that they explain Rey's parentage. But even I would have felt left wanting if they would have been like, it's still a mystery. We don't like.
Yeah.
She didn't need to be tied to one of the families for me. I just wanted an explanation on that specific thing because I really care about her as a character. So I walked out of there and I just had fun. I felt like a kid watching it. I was entertained. I had a big smile on my face while I watched. And same as you, my only thing, we called each other that night or the next day, and I just said, just the pacing was the only thing. I wanted to, and me, the emotional guy, I wanted to sit and stew in the emotional weight of a scene.
Yeah.
Take, for example, 2 things. 1, C-3PO's memory getting wiped in order to
Yeah, that was really quick.
That could have had me in a puddle of tears had they let that moment just sit for a second.
No kidding.
Because his story goes back 42 years. He's watched all his friends, and when he turns and says, "I just want to look at my friends one last time." Like, I could have been a mess, but then Poe goes, "Oh, they're coming. We got to go." And it was just over like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh, like, kind of like you, like, I want to sit and I want to bask in the
But when you're trying
emotion
to
of that
save
scene.
the galaxy,
Same,
sometimes you just don't have the time.
the same is true for Leia, man. Like, you could have, between the whole,
yeah.
her sending her goodness to Ben in that moment, and then Han coming in, that could have had me, because she's passed, obviously, Carrie Fisher, and knowing that, like, that moment, and it was just very quick. Like, yeah, they showed Chewie crying, and they showed Poe talking to her body after she had passed, but, like, you could have really but so for me, it was just the pacing. I wanted to enjoy these moments a little more, and it felt like I didn't have time to. It was just boom, 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 boom. Yeah. So the pacing and criticism, I don't even really feel like it's a criticism. It was just like, I wanted to enjoy the moments you gave me a little longer.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminds me of a funny analogy. Of course, I'll tie it to food. So when my wife and I go get subs anywhere, she'll always pick off like extra hunks of meat, and she'll say, "There's just too much meat on this sub." And I go, "You just gotta stop. You're the weird one here." 99% of Americans are going to look at a sub and go, there's not enough meat on this sub.
Right.
You're just in the weird camp here. And I think so many films get critiqued for feeling too slow that if they erred on one side, they did it on the side that's typically less of an issue, which is we made the movie too fast. So I think they erred on the right side. That's just why I desperately want an extended version.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then I think if that exists and the footage is there, that would be a really cool way to enjoy. I would be so excited to see that version of the film.
I had some moments where, if not out loud, I went, oh, out loud, because I was just so taken by the scene. A couple of those were, they're calling it force timing now. When Kylo and Rey talk to one another,
yeah.
force timing, but that you could grab stuff through the force time, that objects could move through the force timing.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
When she pulls back that troop transport, and her and Kylo are fighting with that, and then lightning comes out of her freaking hands. I was even talking about it just now, seeing that, and I didn't make the connection to Palpatine yet.
I didn't even.
I just thought that this was a dark aspect of her
I want to go
abilities.
see it again because I completely missed what you just.
That's how she blew up the troop transport.
Chewie's ship he's on.
Oh no!
Yeah.
I know the
That
scene you're
part.
talking about. I missed the fact that lightning was involved.
And then it shocks her. She thinks she's just killed Chewie. To your point about wanting it to be dark, that was one of people's criticisms. Was like, show me some loss. Show me there are stakes here.
Yeah.
Let Chewie actually be gone. That would feel really weighty. But anyway, she looks at her hand in disbelief and she's trembling. She just thinks she's killed her friend. And there's still little fragments of lightning sparking between her fingers. And you're just like, oh snap. Like, that was a pretty cool moment. And then at the end, seeing that she transformed part of her staff into her new yellow lightsaber.
Right.
She flicks that little gear on the top. And you see a new color lightsaber for the first time in 42 years. So there was some really cool, like, oh, cool moments. Some things I didn't realize until later, like Chewie getting Han's medal. So Leia, when she dies, she's clutching Han's medal, and then Maz gives it to Chewie. And so for the deep cut fans, who since '77 Chewie's not gotten a medal, they felt that he was slighted. He actually gets not any medal, but he gets Han's medal. Yeah. And there's little really cool things like that.
Speaking of fan service.
Yeah, so
I was just gonna say like that was probably the most fan servicey part of the film, but nobody was mad about that.
Let's take a hot second and talk about this idea of fan service.
Oh, yeah.
Who else are you serving?
Why are we throwing this word around like it's a bad thing? Oh, you're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved, and your depth of storytelling can't reduce itself to giving the fans something that they enjoy of the franchise that they're falling in love with. Why is fan service a bad thing?
Take this.
Who do you think? Why are we saying fan service? Like, we're not trying to create Cannes Film Festival, high.
This isn't an independent film.
High art storytelling. Yeah. It's for the fans.
It's Star Wars. It's blasters and lightsabers and things that go fast and fly.
Hey,
that's what it is.
Bunch of turd burglars. It's episode 9.
Have you not figured it out by now?
9.
They literally made 8 other films for fans.
That's the dumbest. I reject that term completely. Fan service is the dumbest.
If they, it goes without saying that for all those people crying fan service, if they would have stopped and made the movie that those people want, guess what it still would have been? Fan service.
That's almost as bad as cash grab. You think Disney is just really hurting to pay the bills? Whatever.
Look, Disney had already lived through the 90s direct to DVD whole thing. That was them doing a cash grab under Michael Eisner. That's not what everything since then has been.
You know what was a cash grab?
You know what it's been since? It's been Pixar, it's been Marvel, it's been Frozen and Wreck-It Ralph, and a lot of really good films that have people around the world have loved that, again, aren't high art. This isn't the Cannes Film Festival. This is just stuff a lot of people love. And so that's the cash
Where's
grab.
the Tylenol?
The 90s...
Hallelujah! Holy. Where's
Yeah.
the Tylenol?
The 90s was the Disney cash grab. If you want to use that term with Disney,
So freaking
that's when
stupid.
that was.
Okay, so
and maybe some of the merchandise.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So
What were we talking about?
I came home that night after the first viewing, and I started reading some reactions over the next day or two. Some of the more critical ones, for a moment, I went, okay, like maybe I'm just easily swayed, or maybe the critical writers are good writers. But I was like, okay, I can see some of their points. But the question almost became to me like, why are you digging? In the original trilogy, each movie, you learned new aspects of the Force that you didn't know the Jedi had, right? That didn't bother you then.
Right.
You're going, oh, we've never seen that before. We've never seen Leia been able to survive in space and do the floating thing. What do they call it? That was a funny word. Anyway. We didn't know you could force project yourself into the last battle in Last Jedi. Why did that not bother you before, but it's bothering you now? Why didn't it bother you in Mandalorian when Baby Yoda started utilizing the Force in a new way?
Because whatever happened in the original trilogy is okay, but anything different than that is not. And a perfect example, anyone who wants to be critical of insert any silly animal or alien, especially Jar Jar Binks. Well, Jar Jar Binks is such a silly character and he's so annoying. What did you think the little screeching bats in Jabba's palace were and Ewoks? Like, these were meant to be silly, whimsical characters.
Jar
for
Jar
kids.
Binks was written to be an annoying character.
Yeah, he's kind of the.
That was the point.
He's
Was
the
it was
court jester,
it was
right?
funny that they had to be with him. That was part of the point.
Right. Qui-Gon is so serious, and then you've got. I literally view Jar Jar as built off of a court jester.
Yeah.
But who doesn't even realize he's the court jester.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so why didn't you have an issue with the original trilogy's use of silly Muppets and aliens?
Yeah.
But you have a problem with it when George Lucas is trying to recreate the same type of silly characters that existed in the original trilogy.
Jar Jar Binks is my favorite. That's what I say.
Yeah, Darth Jar Jar, you mean.
I want Darth
So-
Jar Jar.
Okay, we have to stop now.
I still think he's Rey's father.
So I really love and respect a lot of what the Nerdist puts out, started by Chris Hardwick, sorry. So I read this article called "The Rise of Skywalker Leaves Fans Without Hope," and this individual, Lindsay Romaine, just wrote this whole article about why JJ ruined everything with how he started the sequel trilogy, and then Ryan tried to fix it, and it became this whole Ryan Johnson, JJ Abrams battle. I'm like, again, to your point, why do we have to choose? I don't think that they were secretly fighting in the background behind all of this.
By the way, Ryan Johnson, who's deeply a Star Wars fan, by the way.
Yeah, if you watch the
It
making
has
of the
more
last,
movies coming, supposedly.
I think
Used
they
to,
canceled
got
those.
canceled.
They got canceled or suspended.
Canceled.
As did the writers from Game of Thrones, the D&D. Their trilogy got canceled.
Okay, well, that's news to me.
Yeah. Disney's canceled multiple Star Wars planned projects since.
So some of it I was going, okay, like, yeah, there were some plot holes. Yeah, okay, there were some convenient things, like they fall into the sand, the quicksand stuff, and just basically kick the dagger they're looking for. I'm like, okay, that was a little convenient in an effort to hurry the story. But again, why are we picking so much?
Right.
You've not picked it. It felt so. A couple things that I do like to entertain in terms of ways that you could have gone. Take Episode 8, Last Jedi. People really liked this idea that Rey was a nobody.
Right.
To them, in their minds, it signified that you could not be from this lineage or from the main character parentage and still be a hero.
Right.
And they don't like that in 9, she ended up being a somebody.
Dumb.
And they're saying, well, we want the knowledge that just anybody in this galaxy could be a hero.
That was also the complaint from the prequel trilogy about introducing the idea of midi-chlorians. Because now all these kids who were 10 at the time of the original Star Wars felt like, well, I can't be a Jedi now.
Yeah.
Because-
you know, honestly, I would have been okay with either storyline and ending up being the end fruition of who Rey actually is. But
Yeah, it's a fun one to think about.
It's a fun one to think about. But here's the thing too, like, even if Rey's parents were nobodies, Rey still had this air of the chosen one about her. So she still wasn't normal. She still wasn't just anybody, right? So it wasn't like a bootstraps kind of thing. It wasn't anybody can achieve Rey status. There was always something special about Rey, regardless of who her parents were.
Here's my comeback to that. Which makes a more compelling story? That you're neutral and become a hero, or that you come from a line of the most evil and overcome that and become a hero? That's a farther road. If you're just from nobody and you go to one of the greatest Jedi of all time, cool. If you're descended from the personification of evil in this galaxy and still become one of, that's better storytelling. It's a farther road.
Exactly. That's worth making a movie out of.
That's worth making a movie out of. So that's my comeback to the whole, I liked that she was a nobody.
Also, the prequels have clearly established that lots of nobodies had become Jedi.
Yeah.
That's all the other Jedi that weren't.
Yeah.
And you have to pick somebody to base the story on.
Right.
This one happened to be about the Skywalkers, and that one happened to eventually include Rey.
Right.
But even Finn is showing force sensitivity at the end of the sequel trilogy, and presumably is nobody.
And Broom Boy, yeah.
And Broom Boy. So we've clearly established that lots of people, with midichlorians or not, that are Skywalkers or not, have become Jedi.
It exists on a spectrum. So some people don't have to bend over while they're doing chores. Other people can stop ships from leaving a planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my college freshman year roommate, Greg Kistner, a good friend of mine to this day, he started a podcast called Not Another Star Wars Podcast. And before the first episode of his podcast, so travel back in time with me, I think 1 or 2 episodes of The Mandalorian are already out on Disney Plus, and we've only seen the full-length trailers for The Rise of Skywalker. He said, prediction, The Mandalorian ends with Palpatine getting a transfusion from Baby Yoda. And I was like, oh, crap, it could actually end that way. And so the reason I'm saying that now in the conversation is because that is one of my things that I did read that goes, okay, fine. If you're going to bring Palpatine back, we can be okay with that. But to not explain at all how that happened,
it'll get explained at some point.
I saw one explanation that wouldn't even necessarily be retconning if Disney decided to implement this. In the movie, basically, Palpatine describes that when a Sith dies or a Sith is killed, the spirit of the Sith moves to the next Sith, right?
Right, that is what we understand now, yeah.
That was established in the film. So the simplest explanation is that since Vader would have been the second Sith, and betrayed him and turned good, there was no place for those spirits to go once Vader betrayed Palpatine. So he went to Exegol essentially as a purgatory as the Sith spirits. So there was no place for it to go. So the spirit of the Sith was just there.
Yeah.
And then he would have tried with Snoke, but Snoke died, or was never able to transfer the spirit of the Sith.
The big Sith audience was part of that. Like maybe that was like,
and then the idea is
they're like weird devil worshipping.
Maybe they were the ones who built the ships. I don't know. Maybe they're force sensitive Sith cult worshippers. I don't know. But the idea is that's why he wants Rey to kill him, so he can finally move on from this place of purgatory on Exegol and actually go into another body, because he's just been left there. Because those spirits have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So probably a little bit of somebody trying to find a way to make it work. But Palpatine does establish in the film, the spirits of the Sith move to the next body, and they would have had nowhere to go.
That's my impression, is that he's less physical form and more spiritual entity who's just moving from thing to thing, and they'll scrap together and like stitch together whatever body is needed for his spirit to reside in.
And you get the sense that if this planet is
Sidious is just the body that we've seen for 9 episodes.
Yeah, and you get the sense that like this planet isn't even a normal planet. This is unbeknownst to everyone in the universe. It's like the Sith homeworld. It's possible that he returns there and he's locked there.
That's interesting.
Because of the fact that the spirit is still alive of Palpatine with nowhere to go.
I just really liked Greg's theory that Mandalorian ends with Palpatine getting a transfusion from Baby Yoda, and he used the hashtag Muppet Juice. And somebody commented on his post like, I never knew that I would ever see those words together, and now I can't unsee that.
Yeah.
But basically, they would just crack Baby Yoda open and pour the midichlorians into Palpatine.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's funny. Any other thoughts, like for me, or first time before we get into like what it was like to go in then, relax a little bit, and watch it a second time? I know you haven't yet.
You guys will have to dive into that, but I'm sure I'll have more thoughts. Did you mention the Kevin Smith?
I'm going to in a second,
Okay.
because
Cool.
that was really, really good, and I highly recommend that for anybody that's as geeky about Star Wars as we are.
Well, then you guys tell me about your second viewings, because I haven't seen it a second.
For a big movie, Endgame, it's really nice to go in and like all the pressure's off now. You know where the story goes, and now you can just be a regular fan again and just soak up some of the background things that you missed. So for me, I really enjoyed being able to go watch it again, middle of the day, and there was a lot less people there, and just settle in and enjoy. I knew when Rey gets up at the end scene that I knew that those Jedi voices that were coming in, you can see from the credits, that some Jedi from Rebels and Clone Wars are mixed in there. So I really wanted to listen for those.
Those being the animated series, not
Yeah.
the title or film, episode
Yeah.
2, The Clone Wars.
Somebody had said, "Did you see John Williams? Did you see John Williams had a cameo?" And I'm like, "What?" And I totally missed that the first time around. So it was really cool to go back and see him in the movie. It was just so nice to settle in and just see it with all that pressure off. And I think there's a lesson there, back to what Jerry's advice was after Solo, is just like, just relax and enjoy, you know?
Yeah.
Which kind of led me to the conclusion that you're going to get what you want to get out of it. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to go in and be entertained for 2 hours and 20 minutes? You will be.
Sure.
Are you coming in with rocks in your hand? That's what you said earlier for the C.S. Lewis quote, right? Like, are you coming in to shoot holes in it and find every conceivable plot hole because it doesn't make logical sense in the Oz you've created? Then you're probably going to find that too. It wasn't a perfect film. We're not apologizing for the film. This is not like in defense of Rise of Skywalker. There was some things that left me wanting. There was some things that I was like, that doesn't make sense. But Kevin Smith did a really good 1 hour sort of review thing where he goes through the entire plot of the film and he real time gives his thoughts and reactions. He said, "I'll admit I'm biased. JJ put me in the movie." He has a very small part where he literally just walks in a scene. If you don't know Kevin Smith, he's the comedian, director, filmmaker of like Mallrats and Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob. He had a major heart attack in 2018, and JJ sent him a message to like encourage him to get better that says, "Hey, if you get better, I'll put you in the next Star Wars movie." So he got better, and he sends JJ a note that's like, "Hey, man, I didn't die." And so JJ puts him in the movie. So he said, "Listen, I'll admit that I'm biased, but if you're okay with the F word, it's a hilarious review of The Rise of Skywalker," because he goes through the whole movie using super relational, relaxed, non-Star Wars fan terms.
Yeah.
He's just explaining it in really layman's terms and being really funny live in real time. Here's what he said, and I watched that today. Here's what he said. He said, "That's what these movies are. Some people are like, oh, they got to be this thing and they got to be the other and whatnot. And some people are mad. And some people," he said, "if you just give me moments." He's talking about when he heard Ahsoka's voice, which is from both Clone Wars and Rebels. He said, "If you just give me enough moments like that, I'm fine. I'm not looking for classic literature from these movies. I've been seeing them since I was 7 years old. You know, they're fun and they're big and they mean something to me personally. But like, they don't have to be bleeping perfect, man. They're adventure series. And at the end of the day, you give me enough nice moments, a collection of moments where I'm like, man, that was great. That was great. You know, those things can sag a little as far as I'm concerned." And putting Ahsoka's voice in there, just like Leia holding that medal, that was like, Luke raising the X-Wing. That's like, he's like, "I think you did it." Right? There are so many nods to Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And that was kind of like, it's an expanded version of the tweet that I shared at the outset of this podcast. It's just people trying to tell good stories, man. And yeah, you may have created a better version in your mind.
Right.
You may have, but you're not a fiction writer. and
Yeah.
you don't have an audience, and the people that they voted the best people to tell those stories are the ones behind the curtain. So just like you said, Kendall, that is the last installment of the Skywalker saga, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, just little details that fan service. Like it obviously was fan service to see Lando and Chewie riding in the Falcon together, and it's like, well, I don't know. There's lots of those fan servicey things that I kind of thought to myself, even as I was watching the movie, that well, like this is the peak. This is the end of like this generation upon generation long struggle against the Sith. And so it makes sense that like the heavy hitters would muster up the strength to come in for the final push, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that Lando would be there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And
it makes sense that he would be the one with the Falcon because he's familiar with it. Like it,
Absolutely.
it's logical that Chewie and Lando are in the final scenes of the movie in the
Yep.
Falcon. Anyway,
Just a little bit of like fun, like fan fiction, if we can allow it. Like you brought up a really good point, Dylan, that in that final moment, a la Two Towers, when Gandalf comes down the hill to help the battle at Helm's Deep, like it would have been really cool when all those ships came in from the Resistance. Take 30 seconds, take 30 extra seconds, and just show individual races of people that we've come to know and love over the 42 years going, let's get them, or
Yeah,
or,
I think the example that I used was like, show me inside a quick cut to a group of Mon Calamari, on aboard their ship, and then cut to another one where there's some Mandalorians on their ship, and you're literally just looking at the bridges of these ships. With you could have done it in 15 or 20 seconds. And you could have done it with 3 or 4 races. And
that's not the way they decided to do it, Dylan. So
know.
just calm down.
Yeah, they built 400 planet destroying ships, and they only have one control tower.
Yeah,
plausible.
Yeah, I feel violated. No, I saw it the second time. The first time I saw it by myself, which was very good. I enjoy seeing movies by myself.
Preach.
Word. And I walked out of there loving it. I walked out of there kind of in awe, and also kind of tired. And just a side note, I was sitting I was on the end, and next to me was like a 7-8-year-old boy, and then his father. And after the movie was over, like you've got this boy, like this 7-8-year-old boy who just watched like this amazing fast-paced action film, and he just said like I liked it, and I was like, oh dude, that's so awesome. His dad then comes in with, well, I'm not sure if I liked it, to be honest with you. I'm like, you jackass.
Come on, man.
Just let the kid.
you are a thief of joy.
Anyway, I actually, like, in that moment, like, I felt bad for that kid. That was his
You
father.
really want to look over the dad and just go, seriously?
Like, really?
Come on, man. Let him have it.
Let the kid just enjoy.
That's what happened to all the adults with the kids that were kids during the prequels.
Yes.
That's exactly what
That's
happened.
right. They have a poor experience of watching the prequels with their fathers, and now they're...
It all goes back.
I want everyone who was between the ages of 6 to 12 or 13 when the prequels came out and the first time you saw Jar Jar, I want you to be really, really honest and dig down deep and ignore everything you've read on the internet, and you tell me you hated Jar Jar.
Exactly.
You go back to when you were a kid during those movies and tell me you genuinely hated episodes 1, 2 and mean it. After you search your soul, and I bet you can't say
I
it.
can guarantee you, an 8-year-old seeing Jar Jar for the first time, Jar Jar is their favorite thing about
You thought
that
it was
movie.
funny, and you thought he was silly, and that's exactly what
And
George
then it
Lucas
becomes
was trying to do.
uncool. And then it becomes
Those
uncool.
movies aren't perfect either, but I'm just saying, everyone who wants to hate, it's the internet piling on, because everyone wants to be the one with a fresh opinion, and they don't care whether it's good or
Man.
bad. They want to be the insightful one.
We like complaining about people.
Yeah. This is why this is Seinfeld in the Midwest.
George Lucas was on a panel in the last 5 years or so, and I saw him on YouTube say this, and And you could tell he really struggled to utter the words that would follow. But he goes, you know what? And he said, quote, I'm not supposed to say this, but this was written for 11, 12, 13-year-olds. Like, because it was kind of like, can you explain all the backlash? And he's like, this was written for kids. This was a space adventure.
It was the Flash Gordon like sci-fi serials and stuff that he watched when he was a kid that he based it on. It was meant to be
Exactly. That's a fantastic point. It's like
children.
Who would have known that people are going to grow up to be in their 30s still collecting Lego?
Yeah. What a bunch of losers.
But you can't help that it does mean a lot to you, and that it does sort of become this unwieldy sort of thing in your life. Even Kevin Smith, who you really should watch that if you're a Star Wars fan. You don't have to love Kevin Smith. He cries 3 times while he's reviewing the movie. Like full on cries. Now, he could have been high as a kite, but
Kevin Smith. Yeah.
You could tell it was really meaningful to him, and you could see this 7-year-old boy come out in him. But he said, a couple of things that would have been really cool. One of his friends is a screenwriter, a guy named Eric Carrasco, who did a lot of the writing on Supergirl and stuff, and has worked with him in the past. So Finn and Jana is a character we meet on Endor. She was a stormtrooper like Finn was. She tells Finn this story where her and all the other stormtroopers were asked to execute these, just innocent people. And she said, we all just put our guns down. Like, we didn't do it. Like, we can't explain it. This guy, Eric Carrasco, says, put one more sentence in there where she says to Finn, it's because we heard of you. It's because we heard your story. It just adds so much more cool weight to it that what Finn did in Force Awakens had rippled. That little, like... And I don't think that's even being critical. That's just like, oh, you could have had half of a second more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's little nods to sort of like a rekindling of the right, because when Force Awakens comes out, it takes place in this world where nobody believe, like the concept of the Jedi. It's just it's just legend,
right?
And people really don't believe that it actually ever there actually were Jedi. But
another thing I picked up on the second viewing was the now famous Kylo shrug. So right after he gets the lightsaber from Rey when they're force timing, and she passes it to him when he's surrounded by the Knights of Ren.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just, Kevin James goes, so he takes off all of his goth emo stuff. He goes to the Gap, gets himself a real cool knit sweater, and then and then goes to save the girl he loves. But after he gets the lightsaber from behind his back, he kind of looks at the Knights of Ren and just goes, and then attacks them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that
was something that I only caught on the second time around. I caught that.
Adam
and
Driver.
I thought it was amazing.
Adam Driver, man, he did such a great job in this trilogy.
He did.
A lot of people are saying he carried the whole trilogy on his back. I'm like, oh, jeez.
Yeah, he's getting credit for the sequel trilogy like Ewan McGregor was for the prequels.
Sure.
Like the acting chops of one person carried 3 films.
Daisy was pretty amazing.
So all in all, I really enjoyed it. A really fun adventure. It really is the swashbuckling space adventure. Not perfect. Sure, it has some plot holes, but why do you care so much? Just enjoy. I realize we've talked about it for over an hour. It means a lot to all of us. But just try to like channel your inner kid before you were like before the world hurt you, and just enjoy it.
Yeah, be a good reader.
Let's talk about Mandalorian a little bit, if you guys want, before we wrap. Now we're kind of breaking out into broader Star Wars universe and this show that has become, I mean, I don't think they even knew like that this show would be as huge.
They would have figured
as huge, but Baby Yoda and some of these aspects of it that have just become so weighty and we even joked about it on our social media, like. The internet gods demand that we post a picture of Baby Yoda. So I know, Kendall, you haven't seen it. Right. Dylan, do you want to just give your thoughts on the entire show?
Yeah, I mean, because the show wrapped the same time. No, almost wrapped. The final episode came after the Rise of Skywalker. Is that right? Yeah, because 7 came the Wednesday before.
Yeah, chapter 7. Sorry,
because
Kendall.
both of them were out, and the Mandalorian season 1 was finished around the same time. I wasn't comparing them, but I was just thinking about the fans' reaction to both. Why is something like The Last Jedi incredibly polarizing? The Rise of Skywalker is polarizing. Not nearly as much. I mean, overall fan reviews, I think it's an 80-something at Rotten Tomatoes. So people generally really like The Rise of Skywalker. Good. And then why does Mandalorian universally loved?
Right.
And I can only boil it down to one thought, and it's that the stakes in The Mandalorian are lower. And I don't mean in universe. It's a mini series on a subscription service that has a paywall. Far more people are going to go see episode 9. Episode 9 is the culmination of 9 films after 42 years with the same characters that we've seen played out for 42 years. And the stakes are so much lower in The Mandalorian because if they mess it up, it's not beloved characters.
And in Mandalorian, you're creating a narrative from nothing versus the Star Wars episodes. You're creating a narrative still, but now it's being held up against the collective narrative of the Star Wars fandom.
And so it all boiled down to the stakes were so much lower. The pressure and the tension and expectations were all much lower. And people could go in and do exactly what you just said, which is just feel like a kid and enjoy it. Because I specifically made a note, we deal with force healing in Mandalorian. That seemed like people were upset about, that we're learning about new force powers in The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, Baby Yoda was doing it.
Take that.
Baby Yoda quickly learning force powers. The pacing is way different in Mandalorian. It's much slower. If there's been any complaints about The Mandalorian, a few people felt like the first half of the season was slow. Here's a tip. It's a season of a show. It takes time to build. You can't jump right to the big baddie in episode 1. You've got to build with smaller obstacos along the way.
Got it, yeah.
It's just different. And then the humor in the last episode of The Mandalorian, there's 2 scout troopers talking.
Yeah.
One of them is Jason Sudeikis, which we found out after the episode. But that kind of humor is there's too many jokes in The Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi and The New Hope. It's like Disney's just trying to force all this comedy in it. It was literally, 2-3 minutes of scout trooper
people
banter.
are already asking for a spin-off of those 2 scout troopers.
And so it's like Mando's doing all these things people are complaining about, but because the stakes are so much lower, no one cares. They just sat and enjoyed it. And so my reaction is I think it's been fantastic. If you've watched any of the Clone Wars and Rebels animated series, Dave Filoni was kind of the creative mind. He deserves a boatload of credit on top of Jon Favreau, who actually was the one who had started coming up with the idea and pitched it to Kathleen Kennedy. So Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have done an incredible job with the show. A lot of the directors are big names. I think the final episode was Taiki Waititi, who did the Thor Ragnarok, and he directed an episode of this, and he'll be doing I think it's Deborah Chow did one of the really popular episodes on Mandalorian. She's doing the Obi-Wan series on Disney Plus. So they're getting some really big names, and it's been incredibly good. The series has been so good. The Cara Dune character that they introduced was fascinating.
She was an MMA fighter.
Yeah. I forget her real name now. I'm blanking on it. But I don't know how spoilery we're going to get on Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's fine. I think, though, you're onto something with not just low stakes, but something you brought up, Kendall, earlier that may have been one of the constraints about Episode 9 is it is the end. We know it's the end with characters that we know and love and have loved, some of them, for 42 years. This, we don't know the end. We don't know how long it's going. We don't know any of the characters. And we are almost forced to just sit back and enjoy. We have no expectations.
Give it time.
I'm sure. Yeah. I know.
We'll find a way to wreck it.
Yeah.
But that's why people are just enjoying, and that's why it's so popular. It's because there's no stakes in the terms of it doesn't matter how well it does. But
people get to go into The Mandalorian and just say, tell me a story.
Yeah.
Versus you go into Episode 9 and people are saying, I hope they got the story right.
I have expectations for how this is going to go, and you need to deliver.
Yeah. And what happened in May of 1977? People came in and said, tell me a story.
Yep.
and the whole world was created before their eyes.
Yeah.
And so
Billy Joel wrote a song. Never
We
mind.
didn't start the fire.
There was a 4 left-hand turn joke that happened in my head that I don't care to explain. I'm just gonna let it go.
But yeah, it's so good, so well done. If you're at all interested in movie making or like the behind the scenes, I've shared many times that one of my favorite things about movies is usually the second disc or the extras, especially with things like Pixar films. We shared from our Facebook page a really interesting thing about new technology that Jon Favreau is using on the set of Mandalorian. It's super interesting to see how this works. It's called real-time rendering, where instead of just a blue or green screen behind them, they actually have digital screens that show them some of the environments, and they can manipulate it all in real time with 3D glasses on, so they can add dusk and clouds and change the time of day. So the actors are wrapped with
It's an
basically
environmental video wall behind them, essentially.
But it gives them something to react to. That's one of the things that they said was so difficult in the prequels, was that it was just difficult to talk to aliens that aren't actually there,
Right,
to
yeah.
pretend that you're in a lava river. This stuff is so interesting in how they can manipulate it. The artists and the filmmakers, that they can wear 3-dimensional goggles and go, change that, move that. And it's fascinating to watch. It's maybe only 15, 17 minutes long. Go watch it. It's on our Facebook page. But it's just really cool, the technology that they're using. Again, one of my buddies, Brian Mattias, had designed a lot of these characters. The Mandalorian himself, as well as Moff Gideon. He designed these costumes and characters. So I feel like I'm a little bit close to it. And in that way, just knowing people that have worked on it, it's just so fun to watch. It really does feel like a Western. In a lot of ways, this like sort of lawless universe, and then you've got the comedic relief of Baby Yoda as well as other things. So it makes sense why so many people are responding the way that they are, because it's just really well done. So if you have Disney Plus, if you're even considering Disney Plus, I would say it's worth getting it almost just for this show. You unsubscribe whenever you want. There's a lot of good content on there, but man, it's worth watching.
And
If you have a Verizon Unlimited plan, by the way, you have a subscription. You just need to sign up.
Yeah, you already have it.
yeah. And when you get to the end of season 1 of Mandalorian, literally, I think the last scene, there's going to be a tie-in. If you're not familiar with exactly what happens at the end of that episode, there's really a pretty heavy tie-in to the animated series of Clone Wars and Rebels. And if you haven't seen those are certainly worth watching. There's a new series that's animated called Rise of Resistance that I don't think has had as much of an impact on the Star Wars community, but for most Star Wars fans, they really love Clone Wars and Rebels, those series. And if nothing else, you can look up the Wikipedia entries on some of what's happening in our Wikipedia, I should say. And you can get you can fill in some of the gaps of why what happens at the end is a big deal and where the story's probably going.
And I saw today that there's rumors that Rebels is coming back.
I had never heard that, but I know Clone Wars is getting another season that I think is due February 2020. So Clone Wars is getting more, so it wouldn't shock me if Rebels was coming back. They really took a lot of... you get a lot more of the main universe characters in those shows than you expect when you watch through. And if you don't have to be a hardcore Star Wars fan to enjoy them. I've never done any of the extended universe stuff or comics or novels or legends or any of that, as it's called now. I've not done any of that. But I had always kind of thought I'll at least watch the canon Star Wars universe video content. You know, if I can throw it on Netflix, I'll at least watch it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with Clone Wars and Rebels, and I'm watching Resistance right now on Disney Plus. So,
And if you poo-poo those as just cartoons and you minimize them based on that, I would tell you the fact that they've decided to include some of these characters in the major episodes should tell you their weight. Honestly, if you just look at the whole Star Wars universe, some of my favorite Star Wars moments have come from Clone Wars and Rebels. And I'm just now started season 2 of Clone Wars and I'm in season 2 of Rebels. So I'm not caught up. And I know there's a lot of big stuff that happens and I know a lot of it ties in. But to see like clones fighting, Commander Cody and Rex, and to see some of those guys fighting and like It's really good storytelling.
Yeah.
Dave Filoni does a stellar job on both of those shows. And again, I've not watched even a third of the first.
I've heard a lot of great things about those. My Star Wars experience has been only the feature films. But I mean, Mandalorian, I'm definitely going to go into, in part because it's current pulp culture. But then I'm also interested in that, and I'm almost positive that that's going to lead me into everything else.
Even the opening title of Clone Wars always starts with a quote, like right after the title sequence. I'm like, man, some of those are good enough to be in the Quotes That Shape Us episode. Like, they're really good. Like,
They very
messages.
intentionally built it in a way that it should appeal to kids and adults. And there's very clearly life lessons in Clone Wars that they're trying to get through the episode, tying into the quote at the beginning very often. And it's great. I mean, because you don't have the whole scroll. It's not a opening scroll episode thing, but they do their little music bit and then they share a quote and then they move on. And it's quite good.
Is the quote relevant, or are they just like throwing knowledge at you?
No, the episode will play out whatever the quote just was.
Got it.
Yeah. There might be exceptions to that, but generally it relates to the episode. So
Yeah. Good stuff. It's always fun to talk Star Wars for an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you guys for hanging in. We would love to hear your thoughts on either The Rise of Skywalker or The Mandalorian or something from anything about the Star Wars universe. Just share.
Yeah.
If you want to complain.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
it's cool.
If you want to complain about how we complain too much, because I'm sure we do. We complain about complainers too much.
Yeah.
Listen, I didn't like everything about. We didn't do our ranking thing.
Oh, stop.
You brought up the idea of sort of like playfully and just sort of for funsies. Like, what if we ranked it? We didn't get to do that. That might come up on a different episode. But listen, the prequels are pretty down there for me. It's okay. Rogue One is pretty up there for me and might even trump some of the original trilogy films.
What?
Yeah.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah,
so-
say Trump.
So it's okay. We're not Star Wars apologists. We didn't love everything about it. But more and more, we're just taking on this idea of just like, sit back, enjoy, relax. Like, it's pretend, and it's just people behind a curtain trying to make compelling stories. So, yeah, it's fun to talk about. A couple shout outs just for funsies. We're not sponsored by you guys yet. Shout out to Cap City Outfitters for the t-shirt. This sitting on the table here, if you're on the YouTubes and the interwebs, this is a figure that I got from Sideshow Collectibles. If you've seen anything from Sideshow Collectibles, they make all kinds of figures, not just exaggerated cartoon ones. They make super detailed, like actual clothing materials, all geek culture, not just Spider-Man or Star Wars. Check out Sideshow Collectibles. This is a toy, designer toy that was designed by somebody I follow on Instagram, Tracy Tubera. They did this short run of designer-inspired toys called Unruly Industries. And so that was a little gift for myself. That is the Miles Morales figure from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So I just wanted to shout out some of those peeps. Thank you, Backroom Coffee Roasters. Buy our stickers. Follow us on all the social medias at From the Midpod. Oh, we have some voicemails and emails. We got a really good illustration.
We've got a good backlog, I think, of some fan interaction that we want to
Yes, so
address.
we don't want to do those onesie and twosies. We kind of let those build up for a little bit. So we know that we've got voicemails in our inbox that we want to talk about on the show, as well as an email that we got from a mystery fan.
Yeah, we've got some pretty cool stuff that people have been saying and sending.
Fan art, and so we want to share all that. So that is forthcoming. Thank you for interacting with us in that way. Anything else you guys want to mention before we close her down?
Nopers.
Nope. Appreciate it, Ludacris. Longtime friend of the show. Thank you for listening.
And may the force be with you.